Welcome Robots fans, I'm really excited about this video. I did a ton of research of over 300 bots and titans and over 1,000 weapons to bring you the most comprehensive top hanger video on YouTube. By the end of this video, you're going to know the real meta bots and builds being used by the very best War Robots players in the world. This isn't a list based on the opinion of Manny or Adrian or even me. This is the real data on top bots, weapons, titans, and pilots in the game. I did the math, so you don't have to, so let's get to it. First, let's talk about the bots. To no one's surprise, the Ravana is the new king of the War Robots meta, accounting for 36% of all bots and a whopping 20% increase since the last meta hanger video I did. With the release of the Arnav Poe pilot, the Ivory Ravana Special Edition, and some bot buffs, the Ravana is now incredibly hard to kill. Some of the top hangers have 3 and 4 Ravanas in them, and the average hanger has almost 2 Ravanas. It's not quite as popular as the pre-nerf Ao Jun or the pre-shotgun nerf Leech, but it's still dominating the current meta. As for the top Ravana builds, Storms are dominant with 53% of all Ravanas using Storms. Igniters are also a great option because they have great sustained damage per second, and 20% of all Ravana builds are using the Igniters. Cryos came in lower than I expected with only 14% of the builds, and I think that's because they don't quite offer the close range burst damage that the Storms do or the sustained damage of the Igniters, so that's really why I think they came in a little lower than I expected. The Ao Jun took a major dive in usage, previously being 40% of all bots down to just 22%. The combination of additional flight recharge time nerf as well as the Avenger nerf have really reduced the dominance of Ao Juns. Couple those direct nerfs with the mega buff to Ravana and you have your reason for the decline in use of Ao Jun. Ao Juns are still very strong right now, and it shows since all these top hangers on average have at least one Ao Jun in them. The top 3 builds for Ao Jun are pretty close, ranging from 21% to 31% of usage. Calamities paired with Yang Li are fantastic counters to Lokis, Nightingales, and other Ao Juns, so it makes sense for them to be the most popular at 31%. Glaciers are the clear favorite for Titan-focused builds with massive burst damage and physical shield bypass for Arthurs. I really love Redeemers. I'm happy they're making a comeback at 21%. They're still very strong against all bots. Next up, we have the Leech and how far the mighty Leech has fallen. The Leech in its prime accounted for an incredible 56% of all bots and top hangers. After the shotguns were nerfed, they dropped down 25% to only 35% of all bots. Now with the Ravana being able to outlast and outmaneuver the Leech, it's finally down to less than 1 Leech per hanger at 15%. I personally just removed the Leech from my lineup. However, it was a really difficult decision because the Scourge Leech is an incredibly effective first drop bot, and I suspect I'll be putting it back into my lineup soon. The top build for the Leech, as I alluded to, is the Scourge at 36% of all builds. It definitely has been my favorite first drop bot for many months. Cryos coming in second isn't really a surprise because of the massive burst damage they do and the ability to slow down bots in the beginning of the game. Tied at 12% is Pulsars and Igniters. I see Pulsars as a really niche, great for long range maps, but on the short range maps, they just really get outbrawled far too often. I was definitely surprised that Igniters are only 12% of the Leech population because some of the top players I've seen run Leeches as their starting bot with Igniters, and they just do a massive amount of damage pumping out that igniter fire. So I was surprised to see them so low. Next up, we have the Nightingale, whose usage has nearly doubled since my last meta hanger video, up to 13% from 7%. The Nightingale is so versatile that I'm surprised it's not used more. You can drop it as a first bot, you can capture beacons with it, you can suppress Titans, and of course you can heal your teammates. All of these things you're doing also helps charge your Titan faster. I really love the Nightingale. It's a great bot. Combined with Virginia Walker and some heavy armor modules, it really becomes a pain to kill, and it is extremely difficult to kill if piloted by a strong player. The clear top build for the Nightingale is the Cryo Rhyme, with 80% of all builds using that combination. 12% are using Igniter Blaze for the sustained DPS. A Nightingale can really be a tank when outfitted with heavy armors and phase shifts, so that's why I think so many are using that for mid-game against Titans. Corona Halo taking the third spot with 5% surprised me, since I prefer Storms and Gusts over Coronas and Halos when I do use shotguns on my Nightingale, so that was a bit of a surprise. Next up, we have the Blitz. With the release of the Clive Vicious Pilot as well as the Ardent Blitz, the Blitz is instantly relevant again, with 90% resistance from the Clive Vicious Pilot when its ability is active, as well as the Pilot skill that triggers when you drop down to 50% health. It makes the Blitz really dangerous, really fast. The Blitz is even able to battle Plasma Mings for a short time due to the coupling of the suppression effect and the resistance of its special ability. The top build for the Blitz is the Shredder at 34%, and the unique reason for this is the way that Shredder's burst and reload cycle nearly matches the ability duration of Blitz. The burst for a Blitz takes 4 seconds and the reload takes only 3 seconds, and then you can have another burst for another 4 seconds, which takes us to 11 seconds, which means you can do 2 bursts, full bursts of a Shredder clip for all 4 Shredders, and only have about 1 second where you're exposed without your special ability resistance. That means fully maxed Shredders on a Blitz without any damage modifiers from modules or pilots can do nearly 400,000 damage in just 11 seconds. 28% of players are using Rhymes because they can burst all their damage and then still have time to get back to cover. Punisher showing up here really surprised me until I looked into the numbers, and it's something similar to the Shredder. If you pre-fire your Punishers to warm them up so they're at full speed when you activate your special ability, 4 Punishers can actually do 340,000 damage, again without any modules or pilot damage modifiers, before the Blitz runs out of its special ability. So that's 340,000 damage just during the special ability, and that's why you see Punishers here on the Blitz. In my last meta hanger video, the Phantom went up slightly in use due to the shotgun nerf and the reduced effectiveness of leeches, but now it's down to only 4% of top bots. The Phantom is really great as a starting bot in Beacon Rush, but other than that, its uses are somewhat limited. With only 1 medium weapon and 2 light weapons, it just doesn't do the damage per second needed for it to be a top tier bot. I'd personally take a Nightingale over the Phantom anytime. On top of the already dwindling use of the Phantom now, once the Scorpion is released, I think the Phantom will be history. Top builds for the Phantoms had a lot of different hybrids, and it was really all over the place, but the biggest constant I could find was the use of the Cryo as the medium weapon, 73% of the time. The next most consistent build was really the Scourge Spark build, which is actually my favorite, at 13%. I recently made a video about how you can use a mid-level Loki as a starting bot and still do fine. With so few people running Quantum Radar on their first bot, a Loki becomes a really great option, and the ability to divert attention of 2 to 3 opponents to killing your Loki really lives up to the Loki name. I personally don't run a Loki most of the time, but when I do, it can be really fun, and it takes a lot of effort, time, and attention of the other team to kill and get rid of you. I considered not even discussing Loki top builds here, but however, for completeness, I'm going to do so. Top players are running Halos 59% of the time and Rhymes 35% of the time. More important than the weapons though, if you're going to run a Loki, are the pilot skills. Roadhog, Adamant Roadhog, and the Foolhardy Quartermaster are essential, and you need phase shift. With those, it really doesn't matter what weapons you're running. Okay, so those were the top 7 bots, and they account for over 98% of all the bots in the top hangars. Let me say that again, 98% of the bots are one of those 7, and that's not a lot of balance in the game. The remaining 2% falls on these 4 bots. The Behemoth and Ares are both specialty bots that are usually used as Titan counters. I actually love running my Ares still when I'm solo. The other 2, the Falcon and the Fenner, are actually really great early game bots due to their high resistance and general ability to tank damage early in games while taking beacons. Once Titans start dropping, though, the higher level Titan weapons start ripping through those tanks, so they really should only be dropped in the first or second bot of the game. Okay, now that we've gone over the top bots, it's time to start looking at the weapon meta. Over time, I like to track the weapons of each type and how many of each in the top hangars. This helps me show how Pixonic is changing the meta over time to turn over the weapons and keep people investing in gear. Right now, with the decline of Ao Jun, heavy weapons are basically used about half as much as they were in the prior meta. With the continued rise of the Ravana, medium weapons remain the most important weapon class in the game, going up from 8.9 to 10 per hangar. They were up to almost 16 per hangar during the Leech meta, but since the Ravana only has 3 medium weapons, it's actually dropped off a bit since then, but again, you can reuse a lot of your medium weapons. In the prior meta, there was usually only 1 light weapon per hangar on average, which was incredibly low. That's a whole class of weapons that was basically useless. Pixonic actually had a brilliant response to this, release a special edition bot that has 4 light weapon slots with an extremely powerful legendary pilot, and that's how the Ardent Blitz and Clive Vicious came to be. Like it or not, Pixonic made light weapons relevant again, and with upcoming Hawkbot, that means there's going to be even more light weapons in the mix. Since they're the most used weapon class, I'll start with medium weapons. All aboard the Storm roller coaster. 2 meta hangar videos ago, Storms and Coronas were very highly used at over 50% of all medium weapons. They then dropped down to about 7% after the shotgun nerf, and now Storms are way up to 30% of all medium weapons. They really do great work on Ravana, and that's the reason they're so high here. Cryos actually shocked me. I thought they were going to be much higher than they are. I even heard some rumors that they were going to be considered for a nerf since so many people are using them. But really, 27% of all medium weapons is not that rare for what's considered to be a top tier weapon in this game. So I don't really think we're going to see a cryo nerf anytime soon. I am surprised that cryos are actually down 10% because I seem to see them on leeches, Ravanas, and nightingales all the time. Scourge is down 5%, but I don't think it's really any less effective. It's just that Storms and Ravanas are such a dominating force in the meta right now. It's got to steal from some of the weapons, and Scourge is really not used that much on Ravanas, very low in fact. I was surprised to see Coronas up slightly, but I think that's due to the Ravana meta, and Pulsars are up just a tiny bit, less than 1%, but they did go up. Atomizers are just falling almost completely out of the meta. I have no doubt that Atomizers, as well as the Nucleons and Quarkers, will have some kind of buff in the near future, since Pixonic needs to make them relevant. I know there are some changes being done on the test server, and I'd be shocked if they didn't do something soon to make the investing in Atomizers, Quarkers, and Nucleons basically irresistible. With the decline of the Ao Jun and the new relevance of light weapons, the use of heavy weapons is down overall. Calamities, though, are up. This is no doubt due to the extreme popularity of the legendary pilot Yang Li. Glaciers have fallen off a bit percentage-wise because they aren't very versatile and have a low sustained DPS. They are still great at dealing a lot of damage to Titans in a short amount of time. Redeemers are back. They are actually my favorite heavy weapon to use, and they hit really hard and they're great at dropping bots. The Avenger nerf is real, and the other 3 weapons above are all better choices than the Avenger now. Thanks for the memories, Avenger. Vipers, Embers, and Nucleons all have similar usage patterns, but if I had to pick one, I'd go with the Ember, specifically to counter Arthurs. Just like the Atomizer, the Nucleon is the bottom of the list, and for good reason. It just simply doesn't do the damage it needs to do with lag and the ammo spread. It really just doesn't compare to the other weapons that are much higher on this list. Moving on to the light weapons, rhymes are clearly the current meta choice with 47% of all light weapons. This is due to light weapons being used more for burst damage than sustained damage on the Phantoms, Nightingales, Blitzes, and Lokis. After rhymes is a big drop off to shredders, which are actually the weapon of choice on the Blitz, which I explained earlier because of the reload and cycle time of the shredder being a great option for the Blitz. Everything else on this list is under 10% and not very relevant, but I did find the surge of 5% Punishers interesting since they can deliver a solid punch during the 10-second special ability of a Blitz. Also notice the Quarker at the bottom of this list, just like the Atomizer and Nucleon. It's not good to have a new weapon at the bottom of a list for Pixonic, so again, they'll be buffing all three of those weapons. Let's move on to pilots. It's no surprise that the top 8 pilots in the game mirror the top 7 bots in the game in terms of their legendary pilots, from Arnav Poe all the way through Virginia Walker. You'll notice though that Adrian Chong is still hanging on to a top 5 pilot spot due to the versatility of his 5% damage boosting skill. When we start looking at pilot breakdown by bot, you start to see how Adrian Chong really fills in the gaps when people don't have the legendary pilot to match the bot. So, of course, with the Ravana, Arnav Poe is extremely important for Ravanas, and it's clearly that because it's used in 68% of all Ravanas. At a drop rate, though, of 1 Poe pilot per about 100 spins in the coin game, that's a lot of spins to get the Poe pilot. Those who don't have the Poe pilot yet, the next best thing, of course, is to use Adrian Chong, and that shows because there's 11% of people still using Adrian Chong in their Ravanas, plus they don't have to spend as much gold to level up Adrian as they would a new Poe pilot. Similarly to Poe being a huge advantage for Ravana pilots, Yang Li is at least as important for Ao Juns, with 80% of all Ao Juns using Yang Li. The only reason to not use Yang Li is you don't have one. Alika Renner is okay and does boost the special weapon damage, but it's really just not even comparable to the skill of Yang Li's being able to have built-in quantum radar. It is a game changer. One of the reasons that Ao Jun is still as strong as it is. When it comes to the Leech, Thomas Minery doesn't quite have the 80% of Yang Li, but it does have 67% of the share of the pilots in the Leech. Second is Adrian Chong at 13%. The only real reason to use Adrian Chong over Thomas Mindreed is if you're going to use some kind of distance build where you don't really need to utilize speed. I really like Mindreed and I don't use Chong. Consistent with how Poe, Lee, and Mindreed all kind of dominate the other bots, Virginia Walker is also extremely dominant when it comes to Nightingales. It is a great special ability, worth a legendary pilot, and it shows being 76% of all Nightingales. Again, though, you see around the 10%-ish range where if people don't have a Virginia Walker, they're using Adrian Chong. Continuing along with the trend of all those other top legendary pilots, Olga Menina in the Phantom is about 76% of all the Phantom pilots. What I find really interesting about this one is the absence of Adrian Chong being at about 10%, meaning that most of the time, if you're going to use a Phantom, you use Olga Menina, or you just have repurposed your Adrian Chong to one of the bots that is better than the Phantom at this point. Now that we're done with bots, bot weapons, and pilots, it's time to talk about Titans. When it comes to Titans, the Ming is still the king, with 70% of top players using the Ao Ming. It's actually only down 3% when it comes to the release of the Nodens, the dominance of Arthur and Beacon Rush. It's still only down 3%, and 70% is a major majority over the other bots. Arthurs are down 5% to 16% of top players. I think that's mostly because of people shifting from Arthur to Nodens. I don't see anybody using Arthurs and shifting to a kid, so it is that split to Nodens. 11% of people are using the Nodens, and those 11% have clearly come from Mings and Arthurs. Lastly, the kid is down from 6% down to 2%. That makes sense because really the kid isn't a great Titan. It is the starter Titan. It comes for free. And with people playing the 1,000 coin box in the game, they can win better Titans. And as they do that, they have no reason to use a kid anymore. Many of the question comments I get on my channel are related to Titans and Titan weapons and what people should put for weapons on their Titans. So here's what the top players are doing with their Titan weapons. Plasma Mings are still dominating the meta, with Mings using the plasma weapons 89% of the time. That's a huge number. I was actually surprised to see 11% using machine guns and 0% using the new weapon Cataclysms. I don't know if that's a sign that Cataclysms are going to be buffed, but I do think it's strange to see. Arthur seemed to be shifting away from machine gun hybrids with rockets and sticking to just machine guns. I think the sustained damage is just much better with the machine guns, and I think as people use them mostly in Beacon Rush, they become more valuable just to keep all the weapons the same with machine guns. Nodens, I was surprised, are 50-50 between Cyclones and Ruptures. The coins required to roll 4 Cyclones is really crazy. I actually did a video on how much it costs to Cyclone out and max a Nodens. It is a lot of money and coins, so it's just shocking to me that half of the time in these top hangars, people are using Cyclones. I was really surprised not to see any plasma Nodens in this. I actually have a Nodens and I use the plasma weapons and I love it. So I actually am surprised that I didn't see any in the top hangars. Kids being only 2% of Titans actually had a wide variety of hybrid weapon setups with plasma and or Cataclysms seeming to dominate the hybrids as the main alpha weapon, and then anything from machine guns to rockets or whatever on the side weapons. As a quick summary, as we start to wrap up this video, Ravana's, Nightingales, and Blitzes are all buffed and very useful in the current meta, all being used more than they were in the previous meta. Calamities, Glaciers, Rhymes, Sparks, and Blaze all are gaining in usage. Jun's, Leeches, Phantoms are still powerful enough to be top 7 bots, but they are on the decline. Avengers took a nosedive with their nerf. Cryos lost some share due to Storms becoming more important on Ravana's, and Rhymes and Sparks lost a little bit of ground due to Shredders. Well, that just wraps up this video. I hope you found all the data useful when you plan your own hangar. If you appreciate the amount of work and effort and research that went into making this video, please consider liking and or subscribing, and of course sharing this video with your friends. I think it'll be useful for them to plan out and know what weapons they should be investing in to get as close as they can to these top hangars and the current meta. Thanks for watching and stay safe.